All right. Hello, everyone. I hope you guys are having a great Wednesday evening. Tonight in the Ignite Your Run education series, we are going to cover minimal effective dose, how to preserve endurance and strength over time. So when I created this and laid out the title, I thought to myself, no one's going to want to listen to that. No one wants to maintain. Everyone wants to get better in some way, but in getting better, stronger, running faster, improving as an individual, figuring out at certain points of your training, right? What is the minimum amount of exercise and training that we can incorporate to maintain, to get through those tough times, those struggles, those injuries, aches and pains, those family emergencies and things, to then allow us to build on top of it rather than taking a step back. So hopefully we can dig into that a little bit more today and provide more clarity on the topic. Of course, with these mini webinars for the Ignite Your Run education series, always reflect on the research and use this to guide me as much as possible. So this is not based on my personal opinion or belief. Obviously, I'll layer in some practical application and how you can apply these things, but use these research articles to create the foundation for this mini webinar. If you're interested, want to geek out or nerd out like me, you're welcome to take a picture of this slide and dig into some of the research. So focus on the presentation today, help you reshape your mindset and find success knowing less is more. I was talking to someone today, talking about more is not better, better is better, and sometimes taking a step back and really restructuring your training can help you achieve just great results. Also understand the research. You can prevent a loss in running stamina and strength during vacation, family emergency, or injury. And also, again, why in a periodized training program, there are certain times where we actually want to maintain running or strength physical performance, and then more confidently execute the pre-race taper without assuming you were losing everything you have worked so hard for. I wanted to include the taper in this just because that's another period of time where research shows we can back down and actually improve performance. So I thought it was relevant to this minimal effective dose principle, and we'll dive into that at the very end. So as they say, life happens. There are many instances where we simply want to maintain, right? The goal of the program might be maintain your level of fitness, maintain your level of strength. It's very tough these days because we're in such a, if you're not improving, you're losing, right? We always need to be taking or moving forward to feel successful. When in reality, in the grand scheme of your training, yes, there are times where we want to improve and build and move forward successfully. But there are other times where if you're maintaining your current level of strength and endurance, that puts you in a very good position for success. So we'll kind of discuss what is a periodized training model and different times throughout that where maintaining your level of strength and endurance is important. And obviously there are different times throughout your year where injuries, family emergencies, travels, vacations, responsibilities with the kids or the family, right? There are a lot of different things that happen that either we don't plan for or we just simply can't manage, right? We don't have the bandwidth. So we need to make sure when there are times where we need to back down our training plan, we know how to do so the right way to make sure we're still successful in the long run. We are generally faced with two options, right? When life gets crazy and we're kind of, things are being thrown at us from all angles. We can either eliminate training, we can take a step back completely and accept there's going to be a loss of fitness. And generally that loss of fitness is going to happen if you take a step back and eliminate your training for greater than 2 to 4 weeks. Or we can conduct the minimal amount of exercise necessary to preserve physical performance. So we can figure out here, what is that minimal effective dose I need to maintain all the hard work I put in? How do I execute that? How do I maintain this level of fitness? So then when I can pick things back up again, I can do so and kind of pick up where I've left off, right? So we need to weigh these options. There's sometimes, and with some people, tell them, take time off. Like, you need time off. Life is crazy. Even the minimal amount of exercise is probably too much for what's going on. Don't feel guilty about it. You need to do it. Other times where we can restructure a training plan to make sure people are getting that minimum effective dose to be successful. Good quote from the research article: encouragingly, available scientific evidence indicates that the minimal amount of exercise needed to maintain physical performance may be lower than one might assume. So this is huge, right? Because we often feel guilty taking a step back or knowing we're not actually pushing forward to see improvements with our training program or to our body. And we can actually back down quite a bit and maintain those levels if we can eliminate the ego associated with it that often causes us to feel guilty in the process. The periodized training model is super important from a training standpoint, running standpoint, just from an endurance perspective. We don't apply the same stress throughout the entire year. We actually do it in phases. So if we assume here you're training for a race come October, you start with that base phase. You're creating a foundation of strength, of stability, of power. Usually during that phase, running volume tends to be low, right? Comfortable running miles, more strength training. So we're going to kind of crank the strength training up in that phase to build strength, power, address your weak links, and maintain endurance. We're going to get into that build phase that you see here, and that's when we're going to start to shift the proportions here a little bit of strength training and running. So as you get into that build phase, obviously with the goal of running, we want to increase running volume. We want to prepare for a goal race. So we're going to start to back down our strength training, and we're going to build from a running perspective, increase mileage, volume, intensity, like whatever's required to build and prepare for that goal race. Peak phase is usually when we're hitting our maximum amount of miles. So obviously, with that being said, mileage is high. We need to make sure strength training volume is relatively low to make sure we're not putting too much stress on the system. And you get into the taper, which we'll talk about in a second, a reduction in your your training volume, which actually allows you to improve performance, recover, increase muscle glycogen, feel more mentally ready to perform. And we get into our race day. Hopefully we perform well on race day. After the race day, we get into our recovery phase where we take a step back. Usually I recommend for most people, depending on the distance they're running, about 1 to 2 weeks off of training. And this is allowing the body to rest and recover. Some good research on that. And obviously, if we're not stepping back too far, right, we're not taking more than 2 weeks, because that 2 to 4 plus week period is when we'll lose. But using that period to really rest, recover, and allow everything to come back feeling strong, reduce the likelihood of injury as we get back into our training and so forth. So what's important to realize here, there are strategic points in the periodized model where we want to either maintain running fitness, right? Maintain the gains and the adaptations that were created through training in this cycle. And that's specifically the recovery phase in the build phase, in the base phase. So once you finish your race, usually you're in you have the best fitness from a running standpoint. So if we can maintain the fitness that we've created through running and training for that race, we can maintain that as we get in and start preparing for our next one. We can carry that over and actually build on top of that for the next race. So in the recovery phase, in the base phase, when running volume drops down, strength training volume increases. This is where a reduction in the total amount of training from a running standpoint can be advantageous. We still want to run, but our sole purpose here is to maintain the performance or the adaptations created from our last training program and to carry that over into the next one. So strength training is relatively high. We're going to really build a big, strong, robust foundation. Running maintains what we already have. And then as we get into that build phase, we start to shift. From here, we don't want to gain. We don't need to so much more. We just worked on our foundation from a strength training standpoint. We're going to start to back down our strength training to a degree because running volume is going to increase. So this is where we really increase running volume to improve our fitness. Our strength training is going to maintain through the build, the peak, the taper, and the race day, right? Through all of those phases of the periodized model. And then we rinse, repeat, and recycle. If you can execute a good periodized model, maintain the fitness, maintain the strength, the endurance that you create throughout a training cycle, carry that over into the next one, you can build on top of that and continue to see better results race after race. Obviously, there are a lot more factors in there, the weather conditions, nutrition, hydration, psychological. There are things that can get in the way here. It's not that simple to really just continue to improve, but you can physically be in better shape and a better position for success. So understanding as you go through here, we don't want to just linearly increase or build up and get better. Strength training is a priority during the recovery and the base phase. Running is the priority, the build, peak, taper, and race day phases. And we can make sure when we're not in a phase that's going to directly improve performance in that area, we maintain to the best of our ability. Now, the research shows that how do we maintain levels of endurance? We're talking about running endurance and running fitness. They were really unsure of from a frequency standpoint. And so just so you know here, the three big areas or variables we look at when it comes to training, we look at frequency, the number of days per week. We look at duration or volume, the number of exercises you're doing or the number of miles you're running, like how much time are you spending training. And then intensity is obviously looking at the pace of your run. So looking at easy runs versus speed work versus strides, like those kinds of things. Or from a strength training standpoint, intensity looks at either how quickly you're doing an exercise, the power, the explosiveness in which you complete it, or the amount of weight lifted. So frequency, duration or volume, and then intensity. So from a running standpoint, just to simply maintain your current level of endurance, you pretty much, they're unsure about what's going to happen if you change the number of days per week. So if you traditionally train 4 days per week or 5 days per week, you probably want to continue to train 4 to 5 days a week. It's really unsure right now on if we went from 5 days and we dropped to 3 days, what's going to be the result. But they think keeping the number of days per week relatively the same is a smart and strategic approach. But you can reduce running volume. So this is by about 33%. If you're running about 30 miles, you want to maintain the adaptations in the fitness that you've gained from running that many miles. You can actually drop your running volume down to about 20 miles or 33%, right? Reduce it by a third and maintain that level of fitness. So even though you're training here, you're actually still maintaining that level of fitness that you created previously. So this is important, keeping the same number of days per week, but backing down the volume. So reducing the number of miles per run, but that's generally around 33%. Biggest thing here, and what you'll see through all the research, is we can back down our volume in some way, but we need to maintain the intensity. So if you were, we'll say, running 4 days a week, 2 of your days were slow conversational runs, 2 of your days were was some kind of speed work, we still want to make sure as you run 4 days per week, we don't switch to 4 days all being slow, easy runs. We still run 2 easy days. We still run, have 2 speed sessions in there because we want to maintain the intensity of our training. As soon as intensity drops, that's when we start to see a reduction rather quickly. If you were someone that you can't sustain, say, the 4 days per week and you have to back down to 3, generally intensity will allow you to maintain that amount of fitness shown through the research, but you need to be careful sometimes if you shift too far with not enough slow, easy running and too much intensity within your training. Usually a recipe of things can get irritated or act up from that. You want that base or that foundation from slow, easy training. So really making sure you can maintain the intensity of your training is important. So simply backing down 33%, even though you're taking a step back from the number of miles you're running, you're actually still maintaining that top level of endurance and fitness created through running. Now, from a strength training standpoint, this was interesting, right? We can actually reduce our strength training program quite a bit more than we can reduce our running program that we saw a second ago. Strength training research showed that you can reduce the number of days per week. If you're doing 2 to 3 strength days per week, you can actually back down to a single strength day. And then volume, if you're doing 2 to 3 sets per exercise, you can back down to actually a single set of an exercise. So if you traditionally do squats, 3 sets of 10, as you increase your mileage, you're getting ready for your race, you can do a single set of 10 squats, but you need to make sure that the resistance is the same. So if you're holding 50 pounds in your hand and it's a weighted 50-pound squat, you need to continue to challenge yourself with that same weight. So we don't want to back down the amount of weight. We want to keep the weight relatively the same, but we can back down the number of sets, reps, and days per week. The last set, as it says here, should be near failure. So as you get through reps 8, 9, and 10 of a 10 repetition set, you should be very challenged at the end of that, right? It shouldn't just be an easy set. You need to push yourself to the limit to really target as many muscle fibers as possible. But what I thought was very interesting here is you compare running to strength training. To me, as I look at this from a strength training standpoint and think we can back down quite a bit, right? We can take a step back as you are building up for a race, as there's a family emergency or an injury, and really maintain your levels of strength. Running, we need to be a little bit more cautious, right? We still want to run the same days a week. We still want to run at the same intensity, but we can only back down about 1/3 of our training volume. So being very mindful of how these pieces fit together is important, because as you build up for a race, as you're injured, as you go on vacation, you need to think about, okay, how am I going to manipulate my training program to make sure I'm staying on track here in some way? I'm not losing everything I've worked so hard for. I have a woman right now that she was traveling 2 weeks in a row for work. And obviously 2 weeks is kind of that minimum amount of time. If she missed for all 2 weeks, you probably would start to see a reduction in her fitness, her endurance, and her strength. But we changed her program. We took a significant step back. I knew she's probably not going to run in Germany, or I think the other place was Houston, Texas, as she goes out there due to travel and then family things as she came back. So we really backed down her program to make sure she was maintaining through this period of time, using those as drop weeks, and then building away outside of that 2-week period of time so she can continue to prepare for her goal race this fall. Now, from a taper standpoint, the taper is a structured reduction in training volume for a specific period of time prior to athletic competition as a means to enhance performance. This is typically about 2 to 3 weeks in duration, in the 2 to 3 weeks immediately preceding your goal race. So if you have a race October 15th, right, maybe October 1st to October 15th, that might be your taper as you take a step back and reduce your training volume. As you can see, as you saw a second ago, right, we can reduce the volume of our training and still maintain. I think actually the research on that, if I go back to this, it showed you can maintain your fitness and your endurance for between 6 to 32 weeks. So if you're running 30 miles a week, you take a step back and reduce 33% and continue to train at, again, 33% less training, you can maintain that for quite a long time, for 2 months to maybe 8 months, they were saying, as they retested people to see their levels of endurance later on. So you can maintain that quite a long time if you take a step back, as long as you're consistent with your training. From a taper standpoint, though, this is a shorter period of time, right? We're only talking about 2 to 3 weeks, and some tapers in some sports are as short as 4 days, other as long as 3 weeks. So depending on the length of time that works for you in your sport, but you can reduce the training volume by 40 to 70%. So you can, if you think, you can nearly cut your training in half in the 2 to 3 weeks leading up to your goal race. And research shows that actually increasing the volume, those people that consistently increase their mileage and their training plan right up to race day, increasing volume instead of tapering affords no benefits and may hinder performance. So a lot of times we have this thought process of, I'm going to slowly build up and then I'm going to complete my race. We want to build up to a point, stop short, about 2-3 weeks short, take a step back, reduce volume of our training. And then when it comes to race day performance, we're able to actually perform to a greater degree. It's hard from a psychological standpoint, right? We have this thought process that my race is coming up in 2 to 3 weeks. I'm doing less. Am I going to be ready? And the research shows yes. There is actually an increase in fitness with this reduction in training pre-race. You're able to restore muscle energy stores, increase fast twitch muscle fiber power, and reduce chronic fatigue, right? You've been pretty beat up after 3 to 4 months of consistent training. So this step back, this recovery, this taper pre-race, this reduction in training volume actually allows you to restore the body to perform at a higher level. It's been shown to improve mood, reduces perception of effort, and also increases performance. Great quote from the article. Generally speaking, the problem with most athletes is not a lack of training rigor, but demonstrating discipline and pulling back on training when necessary. Biggest thing I see, it always becomes a psychological thing. Research tells us it's beneficial and helpful and should be a piece of our training. However, psychologically, it's really hard to digest. But you can see here, just looking at some of these small graphs on the side, training on the, I like the bottom one. When you look at the bottom, training with the taper, right? You're increasing the distance to a certain point, the amount of fatigue your body has to endure. You're taking a step back, reducing volume. Your muscle glycogen, your muscle power actually increases to be at a higher level so you can perform better on race day. If you continue to train linearly, you push through the taper, you don't have that time to take a step back in volume, you will see a continued, because you're in a fatigue state, right? You'll a continued drop in muscle glycogen and muscle power. What's important to realize here is that we also need to maintain intensity to a degree. So even though we're getting into the taper, we don't want to eliminate speed work, strides, those things entirely. This is tricky too. A lot of people say, I don't want to get injured closer to the race. I want to back down the harder efforts. You'll probably lose a little fitness if you eliminate the speed work and the strides and things like that. So we want to maintain some type of speed work and intensity, continue to hit our paces. Don't take a step back completely and just resort to all slow, easy running. Have those faster paces in there. And that's how you really perform best on race day. So take home message, it's understandable and actually necessary to back down your training at certain points. Don't think that if you're not improving, you're a failure or you're getting worse. Technically, if you can maintain at the right periods of time, if you can maintain everything you've created by training for a race, if you can maintain that for the 1 to 2 months between that training cycle and the next training cycle, you can build on top of that for your next goal race. And then from a strength training standpoint, if you can maintain your levels of strength, your levels of power as you increase running volume, and running volume is high, before you start to increase strength training again, after you get past that goal race, we can continue to compound, right? We were building more on top of this. Most people I see, they're like a yo-yo, right? They do fantastic at certain times. They execute, they follow their training plan, they do well, they build, and then something happens in life, whether it's an injury, it's a family emergency, it's work stress or work travel or what have you, and then they get completely derailed. So we're doing great or we're doing nothing and we're taking a step back. If we can find a nice happy medium in there and we can maintain during those periods, you just get right back on track, right? It shouldn't be much of an issue if you're consistent. And to me, I always tell people consistency is the most important thing, right? Consistency of training over an extended period of time, that allows you to get past those injuries. That allows you to perform well. But unfortunately, there are certain times where we fall off track. We abandon our training plan, or we don't follow a training plan. Something happens in life and we get sidetracked. I highly recommend for all of you guys, follow a periodized training plan, because you'll always come out better on the other end. It's the best and most strategic way to perform well on race day, to hopefully mitigate your risk of injury, because you're adjusting those variables, how much volume of strength training, how much volume of running, when you're going to peak for your race, how you taper and back down, right? It really puts you in a good position for success, and the research really validates that. With all of this, intensity seems to be the key factor. So we cannot reduce the intensity of our training. What that means, and to simplify, if you're not doing any speed work right now, that's completely fine. I'm not saying add speed work, but you need to make sure you're continuing to run at the normal paces you're running at. If you're adding speed work, even though you're backing down the volume, you want to maintain the speed work within your program to a degree. Obviously, might be less miles as you do that, because we're reducing by 33%, but you maintain that intensity. But overall, from a taper standpoint, incorporating a taper will enhance performance. All the literature backs it at this point. So rest assured, you can have up to 2 to 3 weeks pre-race to take a step back, to take your foot off the gas, if you will, and reduce volume, knowing that you'll actually perform better on race day. So if you guys have any questions, what I'm going to do, I'm going to post a link in here. A lot of people, I think, based on these webinars, have questions. Okay, how does that apply to me specifically? And it's hard to really individualize these things for each person. So if you're interested in scheduling a complimentary consultation, just to talk through your situation, what you're dealing with, if you're dealing with an injury, schedule is crazy, looking to train for a fall goal race, unsure how, I'm happy to kind of put things together for you and detail them out to the best of my ability. just to help you gain clarity and understanding, because I want you to take action off these things. I don't want you just to watch these and, oh, great, that was education, I learned something, and then you never incorporate it moving forward. I want you to really incorporate these things. So when you get to those tough times, those setbacks, those injuries, you can continue to really stay on track to see the most success possible. What I'm going to do right now, I will send the link out there. Click the link, schedule that consultation if you're interested. And let me get out of this. That way it can hopefully help answer your questions. There were a couple questions that were left when people signed up, and I want to make sure now in the Q&A I dive into those before we log off. If you have any additional questions, now's the time. Ask a question. Click that Q&A button on your screen there, and you can ask a question, feedback, anything like that that relates to your situation. Christy asked, how to keep up my strength and endurance while dealing with slight knee issues. So from an injury standpoint, this becomes challenging, right? Question is that knee injury actually causing you to take time away from your running? You're obviously, you will lose a bit of endurance if you're not able to run because you're in pain, but we can change the mode of training, right? So if your knee hurts while you're running, you need to step back from running. Can we get on the bike? Can we get in the pool? Can we do something else that's going to maintain endurance? To me, strength training equals rehab equals strength training. It's just applied to a specific situation. So should still be able to incorporate a good strength training or rehab program, address the issue, address the knee, address some of the weak links and limitations. In my opinion, what I've seen over the years is injuries can sometimes be the most beneficial time for a person. As you take a step back from running, yes, you are losing endurance, but you're able to address the body and build a stronger, more resilient foundation. You're getting out of pain, you're resolving your issue, but you're adding a good strength training program that actually allows you to take a step forward in the process. So many people with injuries completely take a step back, right? They just rest completely. Hey, this is my knee's bugging me. I'm going to take a month off and then I'm going to resume. Okay, that's great. But as we see, you're going to lose quite a bit of strength and endurance. So now, not addressing the issue, allowing things to get weaker, and you're losing your physical capacity, you're coming back and assuming that, hey, I was here before when I started dealing with pain. Now I took a month off. I'm actually down here in my physical capacity. I'm going to try to resume from that level. And people really struggle as they get back to it with complete rest. So I always recommend, if you have to take a step back from running due to injury, add some other type of cardio in there, biking, swimming, elliptical. I don't really care what it is, something to continue to challenge the cardiorespiratory system, but then really hit that strength training hard, because you can come back and really see good success when you come back from that injury. Adrian says, maintain fitness and gain strength. So this is a good one here. And speaking to mostly endurance athletes, I think an important one to address. If we're trying to maintain our levels of fitness, we're obviously not trying to improve from an endurance, improve from a cardiovascular standpoint, but get stronger. We want to do the minimum amount of running or endurance training that allows us to maintain those levels. And then we want to increase the amount of strength training. So you need to accept temporarily that your running, your endurance is not going to get better, and then figure out how much strength training you can add in, usually 2 to 3 days per week. We don't need much more than that to really truly improve strength. And then make sure your program is geared towards the key areas which are weak. Strength training in a general way can increase general strength, but knowing what is the difference between quad strength and hamstring strength, glute strength, calf strength, core, and really creating your program that's going to be specific to those areas. So I think doing a bare minimum of endurance training and ramping up the strength, this is usually something that fits very well immediately after a goal race. So if you're training for a race in October, your next race is until April, you could have late October, November, and December to really devote time to building strength, maintaining your levels of endurance. So when you get to that next training program, that the training plan come January, you're much stronger. You've maintained your running endurance, and then you can put more endurance and better performance on top of that. So that's it, guys. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out directly. I hope you enjoyed the talk today. Thanks for joining me. But that's it. Continue to build. When you can't build, maintain. stay consistent, keep moving forward one day at a time, and you'll always come up better on the other side. Thanks, everyone. Hope you have a great Wednesday evening, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you.